A viral ad campaign in Saudi Arabia is highlighting domestic violence. In a country where domestic abuse is not illegal and women are bound by guardianship laws that limit their movements, most battered women are left stranded without anywhere to turn for help. The No More Abuse campaign was initiated by the King Khaled Foundation, and that's a charity established by the Saudi royal family. The campaign website gives information on how to reduce violence and even encourages people to report abuse. So could this push in Saudi Arabia, could this actually help the country to establish a legal framework to protect victims? And will changing people's mindsets be the real battle? To help us answer those questions, women's rights activist Summer Fatani joins us via Skype from Riyadh in Saudi Arabia. And also in Riyadh is Muna Abu Sulaiman, the host of the popular social talk show Speaking Softly. And she's also the first Saudi woman to be appointed by the UN Development Programme as a Goodwill Ambassador. And joining us from here in the United States is Saudi activist Moad Aldabug. Welcome to you all. Let's start with that viral ad, Ebtahal. When you saw that ad with the woman in the hijab with a black eye, what was your first thought?
My first thought actually, it reminded me of a famous domestic violence case abuse in Saudi Arabia that came to the surface of the press in 2004, where a famous TV host was abused by her husband, and her pictures while she was in the hospital, her face is all bruised, was leaked to the press. And that's, I think, were the point where people in Saudi Arabia started openly speaking about domestic violence that had happened and took place, I told you, in 2004. So that picture kind of brought my attention to that story that happened years ago, and I started to think what has actually been achieved and changed since then, since we actually opened, the discussion was open for domestic violence in Saudi Arabia.
Let me go to Summer in Riyadh. Summer, the actual ad says, some things can't be covered, fighting women's abuse together. Why do you think this particular ad really resonated in a way that other ad campaigns haven't?
I think it raises awareness. The picture of the girl wearing the niqab is very much, people can relate to it very much, and the bruised eye was really very touching. It was really something that was scary. It caught the attention of people. It brought into focus the fact that violence against women is very much dominant, and we need to address it. Not enough laws and not enough protection is offered to these women. I think it's a very powerful picture that has caught the attention of many of the authorities, and as well as the public. So I really think it was a very strong and effective picture.
Muna, when you saw that ad and it was presented in Saudi Arabia, what kind of conversations are being sparked from it?
Well, this ad is brilliant. Ogilvy actually took the focus out of gender. It took the focus out of cultural issues, and it put the focus on the violence itself. So as Ibtihal was saying, 10 years ago, there was a very famous case when for the first time ever, the face of an abused woman was, a severely abused woman, was plastered all over the newspapers, and people woke up to a major shock. We knew it was happening, but there was never a face to it. But of course, then there were a lot of reincriminations regarding her lifestyle, how she lived her life, and whether she deserved it or not. And let me put that between quotes. Here, this ad is saying, look, this woman is observing all the cultural traditions, and look at what's happening to her. This is about violence against humanity, about domestic abuse in an instant. The problem is that we need to move beyond the conversations. Well, we need to actually have a system that protects women.
Ibtihal, speaking of what Mona just said, moving beyond that and putting the focus on the violence, people online are commenting about changing mindsets and whether or not this will do that. On Facebook, Eden says, it's really difficult to think that this ad will bring about any change in a country where the life of women has been ruled by men. On Twitter, Czar says, what's the point of raising awareness when the government itself institutionalizes inequality? So can you talk a little bit about the guardianship laws and system that helps make this happen?
Right. I'd like first to stress the fact that, as we all know, I mean, just domestic violence happens everywhere. It's widespread. It's not, it's not for like certain ethnicity or certain race or certain religion. It's not like brown men, Arab men, Saudi men are genetically designed and born violent, So it really is a widespread. But the difference is from one state to another, from one country, society to another, is how they deal with that. And this can, I think, only be efficiently dealt with and where civil society is active, where campaigns are launched, where people bother or seek the decision makers and make a case. Change has to come from bottom to top, not otherwise. It has to be part of the society consciousness. That's a problem with Saudi Arabia. There's not much of a civil active society. I mean, there are different campaigns, individual ones, but it's not a grassroots movement. Social workers, I mean, this is very admirable. I'm not saying anything against that. It's very admirable. It's very important. It's great. I know a lot of my friends are social workers, and they really do a great job, but they're limited. And that's the problem, is that there should be laws that should be initiated to protect women. So when you have an ad like this and you encourage women to speak out, which is great, and let's say a woman in a severe case in a scenario, she would go to a shelter home. And if she was lucky enough to be in one of the major cities, now we're not talking about small towns or small cities, if she's lucky enough. And after that, what happens? The problem is she is really sent back to her abuser because he is her male guardian. That's the core problem I think we really also need to deal with. It's very complicated. I think everything that comes to Saudi women's rights come at the end to the women guardianship, and also come to the absence of an active civil society.
Let me just bring in a male voice to the conversation. Mohad?
Yeah. Well, I agree to some extent in some of what's been said, but I'm much more cynical when it comes to the advertising campaign. In my opinion, and based from experience in some similar projects in Saudi Arabia, the campaign would do nothing but generate some money to advertising agencies and operate as a publicity stunt to some government body or an organization. But that's it. That's the whole objective. It's not supposed to solve the problem. What we have in Saudi Arabia, I think Ibtihal mentioned some of what I want to say, but I think it's a structural problem. We have a structural problem. You need to put in mind two things. First of all, the oppressor cannot be the liberator. The problem with women, they are oppressed with men. Don't expect men to help them out in the process. Now, the second thing, the oppressed have a tendency to oppress others. So unfortunately, the cultural problem with Saudi Arabia will keep on cascading and unfortunately will fall into women. These are just the facts. The only way to solve it is, as Ibtihal mentioned, it has to be through grassroots activities and not by theoretical discourse or arguments. It's by actually experiencing the problem with women and make it outside and make it into the public sphere.
Mohad, just hold that thought for 1 second. I just want to bring in some pictures from a lady called Rania Al-Baz. Now, Ibtihal, you mentioned it, Summer mentioned it, everybody actually knows about it in Saudi Arabia. She is a TV presenter and a TV journalist who was severely abused by her husband. This is a picture of her before her abuse. And then when she was attacked by her husband, he took her to hospital and actually left her for dead. Her father took these pictures and she agreed for them to go public. And this was a major, major incident in Saudi Arabia. This was back in 2004. We spoke to Rania actually just recently to ask her about really what is that main problem in Saudi Arabia regarding domestic abuse. This is what she told us.
أنا أقول مشكلة كبيرة إنه دولة زي دولتنا ما وصلت إلى المساعدة الحقيقية للمرأة المعنفة. السؤال الحقيقي ليش ما عندنا فكر يرتقي فينا عشان نساعد المرأة المعنفة وعشان ما يصير في عنف. أعتقد أنا وأؤمن إنه هي الأزمة أزمة فكرة أو أزمة فكر، أزمة إنسان، ما هي أزمة 10,000 دولار تعمل عملية، أو أزمة مرة معنفة تقول لها معلش الله يكون بعونك.
So what Rania is saying is about mindset and attitudes. Summer, you're living in Riyadh, you're living in Saudi Arabia every day. Do women even consider beating as abuse? Because isn't that the first step to actually understanding and solving a problem?
I really agree with what Rania had said very much. I don't agree with what Murad had said. I think it's a matter of mindset. I think a media campaign would be very effective. A picture like that was posted really resonated very strongly in the society. I think women need to be educated, to be aware of their rights. They need to be encouraged to speak up. Women and men also need to realize that they need to stand up and fight against any kind of abuse. It is not part of our Islamic principles. Nothing of any religion or any culture supports any violence. So it's the fault is within the society that does not address the issue and does something about it. You can have laws as well, but you need to look at the root cause of that. That violence is accepted within the society is something that we need to address. We need to change the mindset. We need to shun such kind of behavior from within the society. So I think the media campaign would be very, very effective, and I strongly believe in that. Civil society can be also a partner with the media in order to address this issue. The government can have many programs, but without the support of the media and the civil society to speak up against such actions and such violence, none of these programs will work.
Well, Mona, I want your thoughts on how we begin to address this, kind of looping off of what Femi said about whether or not women in Saudi view this as abuse. The Washington Post recently, picked up on a study, and I pulled it up on my screen here, a map of the percent of women who say domestic violence is never okay and where that happens. People online, our community, saw this and tweeted in. Sadat says, how many people know that rape within marriage is an offense? Hamish says the biggest challenge is the fact that women themselves don't speak out against it because they assume that it's part of their religious duty. And Mona, I know that you told our producers before the show something really powerful. You said, and I quote, the women there think it is a part of life. They don't understand that this does not have to be a part of their life. Could you tell our viewers what you meant?
Yes, so let me tell you a little bit. I mean, the abuse is a triangle. There's the abuser, the abused, and society. And so the society is the environment, and we live in an environment that is unfortunately, because of some wrong religious teachings, views women as being part of an ownership. They're owned by their dads, they're owned by their husbands, and therefore, if they are abused, they should take it. Partly for economical reason. They're dependent on these men for their livelihood, their ability to actually live, to take care of themselves. And so there's that issue. So I love what Samar was talking about, that we need to change the mindset, and the media is the most powerful way to do it. We need to correct these wrong religious teachings that look at hitting a woman as being okay. Any type of hitting is not okay. But then we actually have to look at the abuser and the abused. We can't just focus this on women because we're forgetting about the men. We have to have anger management classes. We have to have places where they can go and actually be treated. We are a very small society. We're only 24 million. Women can't just leave their and family is very important, so we can't just leave our families and have kind of like a halfway house that you live there forever. So the system needs to develop things that help the abuser, laws, punishment, because I think punishment is very important for the abused, for the abusers, but also to look at all the three points in the triangle. So media, laws for the abused, and places for the abusers to go and get treated. We don't have that. We keep thinking about it as only a women's issue, and it's not. It's a whole society issue.
Etal, here's a scenario. I'm married. My husband beats me. I live in Riyadh. Where do I go?
Well, if you're like, you would go to a shelter home that's recently been there in Riyadh for the past, I think, 3 or 4 years. But as I said earlier, at the end of the day, if your husband, if you're still married to your husband, say your dad is dead, your dad approve of your husband violent behavior, then you are really going back to your abuser. I mean, what are we talking about? It really is a circle of violence. And I disagree with Muna and Samar that I don't think it's right to blame the woman. I mean, blaming the weakest link here. It's like the woman is part of the responsibility. But what does options do these women have? They really have no options. And they say it's part of the mindset of the society. So what are you trying to say? Are you trying to say to enforce the stereotype that Saudi men are violent by nature? What are we trying to say here? Changing the mindset is not going to happen unless when the government is suppressing the society's development.
See, I'm really intrigued by that, the idea about Saudi men being a certain way. Mohad, you're just going to be our Saudi man on the street for this. What's the mindset of men in Saudi Arabia? Because there's no way of disguising it, a very patriarchal society. How are men thinking that they are beating their wives or beating women in their family?
As I started saying, it is the most patriarchal country. There are more patriarchal societies and tribes but in the rest of the world. But what makes it different is this generalization of tribal laws and make it as a general legal body. That's a problem in Saudi Arabia. And you know, talking about media, and as I said, I'm very cynical about this, about these talk, about advertising campaigns, about the talk in Twitter. Yes, it's nice and all, but it's just part of these esoteric topic that express nothing but cultural sophistication.
But is it esoteric topic if somebody is beaten and doesn't have anywhere to go?
Unfortunately, it is. Unfortunately, it is, amongst men specifically. It's not going anywhere. What I started this conversation by saying that people need to be, and I don't mean specify women. I said men and women need to be part of the cultural antagonism against authority. Our problem is with authority, religious, tribal. I don't mean specifically government. I'm talking about religious, tribal, and political. You know, the only way to solve it, let's take the US as an example, you know, with the civil rights movement. What occurred before that is a cultural antagonism between the blacks and whites. And the black people had to go to the streets, go do it themselves. That's the only way to do it. Not with rhetorical talk and discourse and advertising campaigns. That definitely doesn't take us anywhere. If you allow me to finish with a story.
Well, Muad, actually, you mentioned something that I want to pick up on because our community really cares about it. You mentioned cultural, and many instances that's inextricably linked with religion. So on the post that we put up about this show, many of the comments were talking about Islam, criticizing it and talking about how it was linked. Sana Diab writes in against that. She says, oh, wow, the hate messages on Islam here are shameful and off topic completely. The article talks about violence, which all countries have regardless of religion and nationality. And Aisha Ibtihal writes in, it's sad that Saudi portrays Islam as a religion that promotes violence. The West and the world will always use that against Islam. So can you talk about how to, separate these two?
Well, that's what I started off saying, that it's really important when talking about violence, domestic violence in Saudi Arabia or any other Arabic Muslim country, to just stress the fact that this domestic violence happens everywhere, but it's how each state and society treats it. This is the difference. And how will it be that the goal accomplished is only through grassroots movement. And what's happening in Saudi, there's a great ad here. It's a good step, but is it enough? No, because women themselves can't coordinate each other. I mean, there is a law ban against NGOs in Saudi Arabia. You cannot have more than 40 people in the same room without a permit from the Interior Ministry. So how could you develop that? How could that be part of the conscience of the society? I mean, look at Saudi Arabia is an absolute monarchy, but if you have an example, what they call benevolent dictatorships, like in Tunisia or Egypt, when it was initiated from top to bottom, people did not accept that. Some people in Tunisia call the Ben Ali's laws for women, they call it Layla's laws, where his wife. So, yeah.
Take a pause, have a sip of water, and people will have to find out what you're about to say next in the post show, which is coming up in just a moment. But first, we're going to go to Malika with some other stories that we've been following.